What's up, everyone? I know it's getting chilly outside, so let's warm ourselves up with some scotch and some beer, but mostly some scotch. If you like these videos, please subscribe. I only drop 1 to 2 videos a week, so your inbox isn't going to be smashed by constant video releases. And on that note, welcome to Scotch and a Beer number 23. In the last episode, I got denied a Dierks Bentley music video shoot, and we frantically tried to get a Supra together in time to shoot Motorcycle vs. Car Drift Battle 3. We did get it running right at the very end of the video, and we got 1 test day in. Santiago also gave me a haircut, and I became Officer Dan for the 2nd time in my life. But first, a scotch and a beer. I'm going to start with the beer this time because this one's got a little bit of history. This here, craft beer, which is a Miller Lite, something I would not normally drink because I just don't enjoy drinking piss. This beer has been rattling around inside my trailer since 2014. Somebody dropped a 12-pack of these off in my trailer in Florida, my first year of FD, and they have been in there ever since. People have slowly claimed them and drank them and so on and so forth, so this is the last man standing. So technically, this is vintage. An aged beer, if you will, for the sophisticated man. And that's really the only reason I'm drinking this, is because I found it whilst cleaning out my trailer, and here we go. Probably gonna taste like garbage. Still has a few bubbles in it. Yeah, beer does not age well. Not recommended. Just wanted to get this one out of the way. She's been through a lot. I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to choke that down. Oh God. Horrible. And for the scotch this time, I'm going to be going over the Grangestone Sherry Cask Finish Double Maturation. First stage, matured in specially selected white oak. Second stage, finished in the finest premium sherry casks. All 3 of these Grangestones have been a little bit different from each other, and each one has a vastly different flavor. So let's go ahead and give this a pour. First thing I get as a memory when I smell this scotch is like oceanside, but also Christmas at the same time. Possibly some hazelnut, but it reminds me of the holidays, which is important because those are coming up very quickly. It's almost Black Friday, my people. This is by far and away the smoothest of the 3 Grangestones. It's a little more potent with alcohol flavoring. Definitely taste the sherry where it matured in the sherry casks. Like, it has sandalwood flavors, possibly some spices. It's good. I don't know if it's my favorite of the 3. I actually like the one that I did previously, the smokier one, but still a good scotch and a hell of a deal for 40 bucks for all 3 of those. Anyway, like I said last week, I went over the actual pre-run-up to filming Motorcycle vs. Car Drift Battle 3. Before the shooting had began that week, I had talked to a bunch of FD drivers and asked them if they wanted to be in the video, to which they said yes. Unfortunately, the hard dates where we ended up filming were right on a Formula D weekend. Idiots. Anyway, couldn't get any of the FD guys, had to scramble to find a couple of bros. I got Andy Barrow and his FD RX-7, and I had Travis Avery and Kasey King make the trek all the way from up in Colorado. Nick and Ernie had reached out to their buddy Buck, who makes these crazy epic dune buggies, to which you saw in the video. But anyway, they invited him. So we now had 4 extra people on this shoot that we never had before, so that was going to be cool. It was going to be a week's worth of shooting, so those guys would be leaving very, very shortly. We were going to start filming the evening after we tested the Supra. I couldn't sleep that night. I was nervous. I was apprehensive. Would I forget how to drive? Was I going to be funny? Would people like me? Would I be rejected? How was I going to do on this shoot? I was nervous as hell. We put the Supra up onto a trailer. We loaded in a bunch of tires and spare parts and whatever else we could have to make the shoot go well, and headed off to our first location for that evening. Now, Jeff Boardman and Brian DeWitt from Car Crafters met us out there to make sure things went smoothly. We got everything unpacked, and the first shot was basically going to be blasting down a frontage road, initiating drift, drifting underneath an overpass and then heading the other direction on the other frontage road. So basically just a big fancy U-turn with drifting and smoke involved. After that, I was supposed to chase the motorcycle guys in and out of traffic. It was going to be this super epic, slow motion, lots of smoke, lots of noise shot. And it was going to be beautiful. I was super stoked to be able to do that on public roads. Like, you never get to do that. Now, because this was a shot that we were doing that was kind of mid-video, it was really important to get everything right because we couldn't go back and shoot this later. We only had this location for one night, and we only had the location for, I think, 3 hours total. So we had to get everything that we needed to get done on this frontage road done that night. We had a little meeting, they explained what they wanted me to do, and I went out to give it a practice run, make sure everything was good, make sure the super was good, make sure it's what they wanted to see, and nailed it. Initiated in, drifted all the way underneath the underpass, and came out on the other side. Of course, we're going to split that shot right there into the Manji section, but it worked really, really well. Now, the turnaround was super, super long. I had to go all the way down to our highway interchange, which was probably a 5-minute drive all the way back around, and got back to my number one. So they got on the radio and let me know that they wanted to set the cameras up. They liked what they saw. They said just do that exact thing over again and we'll make it happen. And I was like, sick, it's on. I'm sitting here at my number one inside the Supra in the Officer Dan helmet, completely pumped and ready to rock and roll. First shot of the night. I give it some revs. I'm laughing at the flapper valve. Life is good. They radioed to me that they were ready to go. They called action. I blast into first, shift into second. Immediately, as soon as it gets into boost, cuts out. I'm like, oh man, crap. Shift into third, get into boost, cuts out. Try to initiate and I just drive through the intersection. Not unlike my runs at Formula D. So as soon as I got around the corner, they were like, what happened? And I was like, well, obviously something's wrong with the car. I'm going to have to come back in and go to base camp, and we're going to have to check it out. Jeff and Brian immediately get there, pop the hood, open everything up. They're checking spark plugs, they're checking wiring, they're checking everything that they possibly can to fix this issue. Somebody brought up the fact that, hey, maybe the fuel gauge isn't working and it's just out of gas. So I said, sick. I'll head over to the gas station and get some of that sweet, sweet 91 goodness. So I got a police escort over to the gas station, which was pretty funny, being escorted by a police as a fake police in a Toyota Supra. Anyway, filled her up, got on it on the street, and it seemed to be working okay. I think we're back in business. Sick. So they got set with the cameras again. I returned to my number one, and action. First, break up. Second, break up. Third, break up. Try to initiate breakup. WTF, mate, spelled with an 8. Back to base camp again. Take out the plugs, they re-gap them to a smaller gap, and by this point, we are quickly running out of time. We've got about 45 minutes left at this location before we have to pack up and leave. In a desperate attempt to use the footage that we're doing, they took Nick and Ernie and they filmed the section of them munging in between the cars and Nick slapping the hood of the one while he was moving, which is freaking awesome. Nick has got some bulls. All the while, we're working on the Supra trying to get it to run. We're doing test runs up and down the street and we cannot get it to not break up. Like, it is completely screwing us over at this point. We basically figured out that if you pointed a camera at this particular Supra, it would shit itself. It ran fine when there was no cameras, and it would run like shit when there was a camera pointed at it. I didn't know cars did that. I thought that was a people thing. Anyway, we never ended up getting it running good enough to shoot with it, which fucked everything up from that point forward. Even if we got the Supra running right the next day, we couldn't afford to do a reshoot at that location because that was a super, super expensive one to shut down and lock off because it was so much real estate of the frontage roads. There was also talk circulating of cutting Officer Dan out of the video altogether because I no longer had a freaking car to drive. I was heartbroken. I was embarrassed. I was scared. I was nervous. I was apprehensive. That Supra. So we wrapped up, we called it an evening, and we headed out to dinner to kind of discuss how we would salvage the shoot now that the hero car was no longer working. And we have now filmed the middle of the video. So it's not like we can rewind and be like, oh, well, he had a Supra, and then he didn't have a Supra in this shot, and then he was in this. No, that Supra screwed everything. So they literally had to rewrite the entire script that night. Eesh. Now at dinner, in typical Nick and Ernie fashion, they stuck up with me and they said, we have to get him in there somehow. We'll figure it out. Thank you again, guys. Constantly bailing old Officer Dan out. Appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And I brought up the fact that my RB car was basically 90% done at this point. We put a big wing on it and it was ready to go. It just needed the police lights. And they said, we'll think about it. Bring it out to Bobby Foster Road, which is a place where we were going to film tomorrow around noon, and we'll do some test shots with it and see how we feel. Cool. Make that happen. We also needed to address the control arm issue that I was constantly having now. I was literally breaking a control arm every single time we went out, and at this point, I should have just bought some Megan ones. Now we got to Car Crafters early in the morning, and Brian and the guys from Car Crafters started getting stuff ready. They whipped up 2 sets of control arms, we wired up the lights, we spray painted and put a bunch of stickers on everywhere. We put Whiskey Garage stickers on the end plates of the wing, and I loaded up and headed out to Bobby Foster. Now, Bobby Foster Road has been in so many TV shows and so many movies, it's not even funny. It's because the road is super cheap to rent, and there's literally only one entrance and one exit. It's a big concert venue in the middle, so there's not going to be people coming in and out, of course, unless there's a concert in which you wouldn't be filming there. So we rented this entire road out from start to finish. It was really easy. You just needed one cop on one side and one cop on the other. So that was also cheap. This was probably the cheapest location that we filmed at, which is why we filmed there twice. I unload the car. I drive down the road a bit, I'm swerving to make sure everything is good, everything seems good, I punch it a few times, it's running great. I go to U-turn at the end of the road. Snap goes the control arm once again. This is like the 8th time this has happened. It ate the fender and this time broke the entire fender in half. I walk back, I get the truck, I fix the control arm and give it an eyeball alignment, then get to work zip tying the fender back together and spray painting it with Plastidip to make it look somewhat appealing. Like I said in my past videos, this is one of the ugliest cars that I had ever owned, built, driven. It was just ugly, but somehow it was fitting for Officer Dan. On the way back up to where they were shooting, I was giving it whips left and right, I was doing U-turns, I drifted some figure eights, and everything seemed to be holding together this time. Now that it seemed like I was 45 minutes late for my noon arrival time, thanks to said control arm, I rolled up to set and the dudes on motorcycles were blasting this huge sweeper, like 5th gear for them, chonging out smoke. It was insane. And this was like first shot of the day. I was like, okay, things have gotten really serious at this point. Of course, being anxious to get back into the video since I was basically no longer in it anymore, I was like, well, when do you guys want me to jump in? And they're like, just hold off for a little bit. And my heart sank. Once they were finished with that, we decided to do a few test shots of me hitting that same corner. No motorcycles, and basically just one dude with a film camera just to kind of see what the car looked like. This was probably the fastest corner that I have ever drifted in my entire life. It was nuts. It was 4th gear and just about all the horsepower that the car had just to maintain a shallow drift around this corner. Now, motorcycles love big sweeping, long, fast turns. It's a little more difficult in a car that is barely making 500 horsepower, and it just did not want to do it, but got sideways enough to get some epic shots, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But anyway, did a few of those hits, and they were like, all right, we've got the footage, we'll check it out and see what we think later. And I was like, oh, I don't get to drive in the video? I thought I was supposed to be Officer Dan chasing these guys. Anyway, whatever, no big deal. I also didn't bring a jacket, it was cold as hell, so I borrowed this fresh Icon gear and for some reason a cowboy hat. Anyway, I just kept watching. Meanwhile, Buck was out there in his buggy that was awesome and actually ran and made like 700 horsepower and could do wheelies. And I'm just over here shriveling down like, man, I suck. And as they were filming, I'm sitting over here like, well, here it is. I just got replaced. I'm no longer Officer Dan. Welcome, Officer Buck. You are now the man in charge of apprehending these two hoodlums on motorcycles. It was a sad day. That was not a good day for me, especially since I was out there just watching me be replaced. I was just like, oh my God, could this get any worse? So I watched on a very, very cold day as Nick, Ernie, and Buck chased each other around all over this place. Buck was just off-roading, and then they finally, at the end of the day, got to the jump sequence, which was really, really awesome to see that buggy just huck itself up over this hill, over a road, and up onto this plateau. I was like, oh, no big deal. Just worked out perfect. So he practiced it a few times, they timed it out, and then boom, did it. Twice, perfect, called it. What a great day of shooting. For everybody else except for old Officer Dan. Anyway, moving back to that shot that they had got of me drifting around this corner. I gave that picture to Turbo by Garrett, and Yukio said, hey, that's a pretty sick shot. Can we use that for our calendar? And I was like, yes, I would like to be in a calendar. I've never been in a calendar before. That would be awesome, Yukio. And he was like, all right, these calendars should be out around SEMA time next year, and we'll make it happen. And so for 2014, Turbo by Garrett released this calendar, and I was Miss July. Pretty stoked. So as you can see here, lack of angle, lack of smoke, I was barely able to do this turn, but I do look cool inside of a calendar. I'll take that any day of the week. So at least one good thing happened out of this day of shooting. Not shown is the other fender, which had cracked itself in half. Again, after a great day of filming with Buck, and no filming with Officer Dan. Everybody was really pumped on the shoot. It ended on a really high note for everybody except for me. And we went to dinner again and talked about how we were going to save the shoot. Now that they'd gotten all of those out of the way, they were trying to figure out how to put me back in. They decided that we were going to use my car, but they just didn't know how to do it yet because that part wasn't in the script. They had to, again, rewrite everything that night in the hotel room. We parted ways, and the next few days of shooting didn't involve me at all, so I ended up not even going. These are the ones that they filmed at the rail yard, with Buck doing the burnout on the wood bricks. Epic, epic shots. This would also be where they filmed with the remote control helicopter with another monster athlete named Alan Szabo. He killed it. I wish I would have been there to see that happening, but I was already kind of depressed and I didn't want to go to the shoot and feel crappy about myself the whole time I was there. They invited me out, I just didn't go. I don't know why, I just didn't go. I didn't feel like it. I'm an idiot in hindsight. I should have just went and manned up and that was it. But I didn't. And I just sulked at home. Anyway, they had 2 days filming out at the rail yards and they got a ton of epic footage from there, which I didn't see any of in real life. And that is where I'm going to end this video. Stay tuned for part 3 where Officer Dan gets reintroduced into the video series. And I'll go over the rest of the motorcycle versus car drift battle shoot. This time we will be downtown Albuquerque from midnight until 6 a.m. 2 nights in a row for epicness. This has been Officer Dan, and I'll see you guys next Monday for the rest of this story. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Officer Dan, out.